For our first presentation. It is called The Two-Spirit Healings and Teaching, Decolonizing Sex, Gender, and Sexuality with Harlan and Jesse.
Harlan Cruden, no mani, greetings, my relatives. My government name is Harlan Cruden, and my Indian name, and I use the I word, you can ask me about that why later, is Waka no Mani. It's actually in Sioux. I was doing some work on the Rosebud Reservation, and they honored me with the name Waka no Mani. Waka being spirit, good spirit, bad spirit, neutral spirit. You know, I can do good just as well as I can do bad, or I can like suck up a lot of space and do absolutely nothing. And so that part of my name is a responsibility of how do I want to show up. And so I try to show up. My intention is to always show up in a good way, with good thoughts, good action, and good words. And if I miss the mark, I don't look at that as a mistake. I look at that as like a learning opportunity. Nom is two, and Mani is a sacred journey. So I was going to get that translated into Cree. It became too complicated, so I keep a Sioux name. And I also said that I am First Nations Cree. My mother's from the Beaver Lake Indian Reserve. My father's from the Saddle Lake Indian Reserve. Two different reservations, but the same Cree Nation. And I'm so happy that I got to say that I am Two-Spirit within my own language. Niha Ayakwe.
Thanks, Harlan. Hi, everyone. As Harlan said, my name is Jesse Dame. I am very proudly Two-Spirit and Métis. My parents are from Treaty 1 and Treaty 2 territory, so what we now know as Winnipeg and St. Rose. I am an uninvited guest on these lands, but I am very happy to be here today with family, and I thank you for allowing us to be here. I am a registered nurse, and my background is in postpartum and neonatal health, so with premature babies, as well as within some remote communities in BC. I now work at a queer sexual health clinic in downtown Vancouver, and I'm the Two-Spirit program manager at the Community-Based Research Center, which primarily focuses on supporting and creating resources with the Two-Spirit community. And then I'm just about done my master's with a primary focus on suicide among Two-Spirit folks and looking at protective factors.
Can someone give me a thumbs up if they can see my screen? I'm going to say yes. Yay! Yeah. Thank you so much, Simone. So first of all, I would like to thank Jerry and opening us in a good way. That song was like so beautiful. So thank you so much. I also like to thank the hosts of the PHSA Indigenous Youth Wellness Team, and also for you all for joining us in this Indigenous Virtual Youth Conference. Naomi, Jordan, Savannah, and Serene, thank you so much for putting this on.
We already did our intros. Quick picture of us. Beautiful. So we always like to start with a land acknowledgement. I know that in current day there's some mixed reviews about doing a land acknowledgement and what it means, and I can give you a quick piece that was gifted to me from an elder in Tecumseh. So the purpose of a land acknowledgement, from what I have learned, is to really acknowledge where we are, where we've come from, and give us that moment just to collect ourselves while we move forward with the presentation. So I acknowledge that we are in Coast Salish territory of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh Nations. We are very excited to be here today, and we acknowledge all of the folks, especially the Two-Spirit elders and leaders that came before us that got Harlan and I to where we are today. So we really give praise and appreciation to the Two-Spirit leaders that have led the path to where we are to be speaking today. So quickly, the agenda, a really rough guide that we'll be going over today. So the what and who is Two-Spirit, revisiting our history through a Two-Spirit lens, which is key, what is being done to reclaim Two-Spirit, as well as we'll share with you some teachings on overcoming challenges and disrupting the ordinary. So really pushing those boundaries that society is currently trying to put us into.
And also to see your brilliance.
Mm-hmm.
So where did Two-Spirit come from? So just a little bit of a history of this word. Up until contact, those nations that had a two-spirit tradition, we had our own words and our own languages that named, accounted, and identified our two-spirit relatives. So at the beginning of this talk, I kind of modeled that. You know, I didn't say that I was a man in Cree, niha napwe, nor did I say I was a woman, niha asquea. I said that I am two spirits, niha ayakwe. And so we'll be revisiting and talking a little bit about those words. Jesse will be talking about them in a little bit. So a little after contact, you know, 1492, I put that kind of like, that's a big day for us, right? A year. In October 10th, 1492, CC, I don't even use their real name, I just say CC. CC showed up on the land of what we would know as Hispaniola today, and put down their flag and said, ha ha, I've discovered you, right? And I'm like, thank you, right? Like here we were just lost, rambling around on our big old continent, and CC showed up to discover us, right? The counter narrative, or the other narrative that I would like to tell you about, is that on October 10th in 1492, the indigenous people of Hispaniola, they woke up and they discovered CC on their shores. And so I think that there's important teaching within that of like, on what narrative or what lens do you view the event or the history? So a little after 1492 to around 1989, 1990, the term Berdache was used. And Berdache is not, it's a French word. It's not a nice word. You can do a little bit of research if you look it up. We find the word offensive, and you will see articles that are written with that word. And so if you do see it, I encourage you to take a little pencil, be bold, or take a pen, cross it out, and write two-spirit. Not two-spirited, because we're not a verb, not two-spiritness, we're not an adjective, but just two-spirit, we're a noun. And where that came from is at the third annual Basket and Bow gathering of gay and lesbian Native Americans, there was, at that gathering, it happened in Canada, just out in Manitoba. At that gathering, the attendees of that gathering, they came together in a big grand council and they said, you know, we hate this word Berdache. And so they rejected it. But then the work was, how do we organize, and how do we organize within a trans or a multinational way? Because there was representatives from many, many different nations at that gathering. And so after many, many rounds and much discussion, they came up with the term two-spirit. They wanted a term that reflected a combination of both masculinity and femininity, which attributed to males in feminine roles and females in masculine roles. And there you have a pivot. The pivot was back to gender as opposed to sexual orientation. It was about your role within society or your function within society. And so it was a kind of like a rebuff against folks looking at two-spirit as just being a placeholder or another way of saying a gay or a lesbian Native American. It was about our role within society, and it was on a hearkening back to that traditional understanding of who were we within a pre-contact setting. Now, how do we understand a world that has more than two genders? So this list that you see on your screen, one is a survey. So I just looked across Turtle Island and I just picked and chose a couple of examples. And I'm not going to go through all of them broken down by nation. I'm just going to show a compare between a Cree understanding and a Sioux understanding of what two-spirit was in very, very broad strokes. So if we were all members of the Cree Nation, we had two big dominant camps. We had the women's camp that gathered, and we had the men's camp who hunted, right? There was many, many other roles within, but just generally gathering and hunting, right? And also the way that us Crees, how we worked, that a woman was never allowed in a man's camp and a man was never allowed in a woman's camp. And so if there was ever imbalance or disharmony amongst these two camps, you know, a man couldn't walk over to the women's camp and say, hey, women, what's going on? And a woman couldn't walk over to the man's camp and say, hey, what are you silly gooses up to today? But we as a Yahweh, we were the only folks that had unfettered and equal access to both camps because we were a combination of both, right? And so if there was imbalance or discord or disharmony amongst these two camps, we as a Yaqui could float over to the women's camp and we're like, hey, women, what's going on? What's happening? We could go over to the men's camp and we're like, hey, men, what's going on, right? And then we could go back and forth and we could resolve the conflict or tension and bring balance back to these two camps. A woman couldn't do this, a man couldn't do this, just us as two-spirit people could do this. Now, that was on a societal level. On an individual level, like, hey, you of the woman's camp, hey, of you the man's camp, you should talk. Or, you know, so we played this like matchmaking and this love potioning. And we also helped with the resolution of divorces. In Cree, we actually don't have the word for a divorce. We call it ripping of the blanket. So we would make sure that the ripping of the blanket was fair and equitable. Now, if I were Sioux as opposed to Cree, there wouldn't be necessarily a social expectation that I would be the go-between for the camps, but there would be a social expectation that I would be the officiant of a naming ceremony. So my good friend Del First, who is Sioux and Two-Spirit, Winkday in his language, has resurrected that role of being the officiant over naming ceremonies. And so the takeaway from this is, although Two-Spirit, we kind of apply, it's really, there is no one way of being Two-Spirit. It is nation specific. So Two-Spirit is going to mean something different if you're Cree or if you're Nuchelnath or Sioux or Navajo or, you know, Ojibwe. And so it becomes a nation-specific kind of conversation.
Thank you, Harlan. So building on Roscoe's work in the Bay Area's Gay American Indian Organization, we have approximately 130 terms for Two-Spirit that have been gathered over the last couple of years in traditional languages. So it must be stated that this table is complete. For example, there's no makeshift word.
Incomplete.
Incomplete. There's no makeshift word for Two-Spirit as of yet. So if anybody on the call today has any terms or doesn't notice their community in here, please reach out to us and we'll be happy to add it. And why are we getting this incomplete information? As we know, colonization has lost a lot of our history within, especially the Two-Spirit realm. And if Harlan and I were to sit down and work on this table every day, it would take the rest of our lives to collect all the terms for the number of languages throughout our nation. So in here, there's the loose translations. There's a number of them on here, but for example, the Cree word, the loose translation is either a man who dresses as a woman who dressed as a man dressed, living, accepted as a woman dressed, living, accepted as a man. So again, these translations are into the English context, which is very much immersed in the binary. So it's translated into male and female, but those words weren't necessarily used in the community. This is just the language that we are having to use today.
Can I just jump in here real quickly? Only because, like, and Jesse, thank you very much for bringing that up around the binary, because I just want to draw attention that English obscures and hides a lot. Like you'll see here for male assigned, Isqueacan, and then you will also see a Napuecan. And I said, you know, for woman is Isquea, and female assigned is, a man is Napwe. And so it's a play on those two things. But the thing is that in Cree, we actually don't have a word that translates into man, or we don't have a word that translates into woman. We translate it into English into those terms. Napueo is the keeper of the fire or the tender of the fire. Esquia is the carrier of water or the givers of life. And again, it's about your role within society. And so although we translate it into man or woman, it doesn't actually mean that. It means like carriers of water, givers of life, or the tender or carriers of fire. And so again, English hides and obscures, and it looks like we're talking a very binary language, but we're actually we transcend the binary by skipping it. And so I just want to tease that out. If like English and working in translations really hides a lot of things, to like Esqueacan, Napuecan literally translates into fake woman or fake man. And my elders, when working on these translations, although it says fake, or we could use the word pretend, it sounds like there's a negative connotation, but it's, again, English hiding and obscuring our translation, because there is no negative or ill intent with these terms that are carried with Esqueacan or Napuecan.
Thank you, Ryan. And which is so key, I think, as we continue to learn more within the Two-Spirit community, but also within the Indigenous community as a whole, that we must look at it through that lens and assess the way that things are written as it's in English. So as we move forward, there's just the number of terms that have been collected. So a number of beautiful terms that throughout all of Turtle Island, which has been great. I don't know if you wanted to read some of those ones.
So I'm working
my
on
translation is Harlan's teaching me a lot, so I appreciate him having me today, as well as working with me for translation.
So I'm actually working on this Tlingit term coward, right? And again, just we're sharing that it's like a loose translation. And so I'm actually trying to get a triple validation process. I try to like get 3 primary language speakers. And so I'm working on that Tlingit. And so when the ethnographer goes, hey, what does that word mean? Gatlan. And the Tlingit people go, oh, the person doesn't fight. And the ethnographer goes, we have a word for that, coward, right? And again, it's just a cleaner and better translation that I'm working towards. And so although it looks like it's incredibly negative, a coward, it just may be lost in translation, and we're just working to clean up the database.
Exactly. And as we move forward, really, I think it's so important to assess the translation through that lens, and that we don't have the words necessarily in English to translate it appropriately or translate it inclusively enough. So the important piece is that all of these words are important. From where there is a word, there is a story. For where there is a word, there is an experience. But most importantly, from where there is a word, there is a people. There is a Two-Spirit, there is us. In absence of these words, often our Two-Spirit relatives are forced in to make a false decision between LGBTQ, I+, or the Indigenous realm. So we're put staked between 2 worlds instead of a combination of the both. So often we're confronted with a false decision that Western society tries to force upon us to fit into one box. So within urban settings like Vancouver, LA, Toronto, to list a few, we try to become part of the LGBTQ community. And then one day an individual shows up who's Two-Spirit, at like today's event, and we learn of these words and these frameworks and a concept that is relatable on such a deep level. So for example, for myself, when I first learned about what it meant and who it meant to be Two-Spirit, it was from a Métis elder, and it was about 12 years ago now, I guess. Whew, time flies. And she was sitting there explaining the history of what it meant to be Two-Spirit in the Métis world, as well as within the Cree world, as I am Red River Cree. My family is from Manitoba, as I said. And the teachings that she gave was just this moment of history of where we were so accepted. We weren't judged. We weren't dissected for who we were. We were a welcome part of a community. We were celebrated, and we thrived in a setting that people were so lucky to have us, basically. And when I was sitting there listening to her, I felt this overwhelming sigh of relief that I felt connected to something that I didn't even know was missing. I felt connected to a culture, or to a piece that, like, historically I wasn't judged. Historically I wasn't torn apart for being who I was. I was accepted and loved, and it was such a piece. It was the first time that I truly felt, and as a healthcare provider, how healing culture can be. And I didn't even know that this weight was on my shoulders that needed to be lifted, but it was lifted that day. And from then on, I've been working my butt off with Harlan and other Two-Spirit folks to spread the word and to connect with folks, because it's so powerful to be able to reclaim that concept and to find these words and to find our history. And it can be so healing.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jesse. In that, these words are really the medicine or the actual framework that we're trying to share with you as the medicine, right? I've heard many, many stories when I've gone to Two-Spirit gatherings of folks that are like, when they hear of like the word, like if they show up and they're male assigned and they're from the Zuni nation, right? And we gift them their word lahamana. And then a framework to kind of hold what Lahamana is. Like, I'm not Zuni, so I actually don't know what Lahamana is, right? And so the medicine or the healingness of that, what was just modeled and shared with Jesse, is that the folks say, you know, like, what do you mean I don't have to choose between being gay or lesbian or LGBTQI plus and being Zuni, right? And then they start this line of inquiry of like, what does it mean to be Lahamana? Who is Lahamana? And what is my role and purpose as a Lahamana for my Zuni people? And it roots them and calls them back home and centers their indigeneity. In the absence of these words, they always feel like they have to make a choice between being indigenous or Zuni and being LGBTQI. And what it does is this full integration of who they are into one packet. And what I have found is that folks who are like maybe doing ceremony or maybe like a powwow dancing or some other cultural event, in that when they leave their community and go to an urban setting to join the gay community, they lop off parts of themselves. Only when they find this word Lahamana, for the Zuni example, is then folks pick up those cultural tools and those cultural teachings. They go start dancing, they start going back to ceremony, because it's a centering of their indigeneity. And so these words are like medicine for who they are. So we're not alone. So if we look at other indigenous communities across the world, they have a very similar sort of understanding, or this gender, non-binary gender understanding. So you have the Hijra in India, the Mahu in Hawaii, the Fa'afafine in Samoa, the Bulbul or the Hijra, like in Pakistan and India. And this list can go on and on. And this list is completely incomplete. Like if you look at the territory that we would know as New Zealand, Eatora, there's the Takatapwe. And I just haven't gone through and updated this list. But it also, the takeaway from this is Turtle Island, for here in North America, we use the term Two-Spirit. And it's only here on Turtle Island. We've yet to have that similar sort of 1990 gathering in which where all of these like gender non-conforming or gender diversity and sexual experiences, for us to come together on an international level of how do we organize and what terms should we use. So Two-Spirit is only here for Turtle Island. We shouldn't impose that upon other nations because we haven't had that kind of conversation yet. And if we impose it onto other nations, then we are becoming colonizers. So Turtle Island, Two-Spirit. Other folks like our Mahu relatives in Hawaii is that they necessarily don't use the term Two-Spirit, and nor would we impose our way onto their way.
And I forgot to tell you that I got somebody from Italy also sent one for us to add to the list as well, which is
oh, cool.
So I mean, a huge piece I think to include within the language is the fact that, as Harlan said, there isn't one definition or one piece. Every Two-Spirit person has a different experience and a different explanation of who they are. So I think that's a huge piece to understand that all of us, me and Harlan, my best friend Leah, like who's also Two-Spirit, all of us kind of express ourselves in different ways, but we all are also Two-Spirit. So here's some images. So here's some images of Two-Spirit folks throughout the years. So unfortunately, we have about 20 photos that we can find since colonization in the 1400s. So here's about 60% of the Two-Spirit images that we have today. So we have some beautiful images. Some folks, I believe, is it this guy here? This?
Nope. Well, we can't point.
Oh yeah.
Otish?
Otish. The bottom right?
Yeah, bottom right-hand corner.
So there's a number of beautiful folks throughout Turtle Island on here today. And then me and Harlan decided, or thankfully added ourselves to the images. So there's little Harlan, little cutie on the right, and then that's me and my sibling. So I'm the smallest one there on the left.
Sure.
So,
wait, I have to pause because Leah said we moved too fast. I'm sorry. Let me go back to Ojibwe.
Yeah.
And the Chippewa language, Agukwe, which there's an amazing play by Wawate, who was the actor, and Okichitawa, for female assigned or woman warrior. So Leah, can you take a couple of minutes? I'm sorry, we will be emailing this PowerPoint out, so you will be able to like look at them.
When I get so excited, and especially within the same room as Harlan and speaking about being two-spirit, I puke information and like speed talk. So I apologize for that, but I'm very happy to be here and to be discussing this. And I feel every time we have this conversation, I learn from Harlan, as well as I can feel it so deeply inside me, how healing it can be, and how beautiful this concept is, challenging, or how beautiful we are as a people, is challenging society that has tried to shove us into so many boxes. And the history, the interesting component for especially the two-spirit community is the racism that we experience out within the non-Indigenous community, as well as the potential homophobia, transphobia, and discrimination that we experience in community due to colonization and different forms of shame as a result. So we are a very specific group of peoples that harbors very different concepts that are so amazing to learn about and so powerful.
The last little thing is my fly is open in this picture.
Oh my gosh, I love it. But look at those little cheeks. So we're gonna get into a little bit of history. Here with some images. I had some feedback a couple weeks ago just about a trigger warning. Harlan's gonna get into a little story, not a little story, a big story, but just a piece about our history, and there's some aggressive points attached to it in a sense, I think.
Sure.
You can explain.
So, from the last slide that Jesse showed us, or 2 slides ago, about the history of about the 20 known historical images of our two-spirit relatives, in which that we were honored, respected, and celebrated and lifted up, and we had our own role within society. Now that all kind of changed after 1492. This is a famous painting that hangs in the Spanish archive. And the National Spanish Museum. A lithograph of this is housed at the New York City Public Library on 42nd and 5th. And this is a counting of the story of Captain Nunez de Balboa, who was a Spanish conquistador, who in 1513 was roaming the land that we would call Panama today, and found that there were groups of men engaged in same-sex sexual relations. And so what did he do? He rounded them all up and he had a big old party. No, he rounded them all up and he fed them to his war dogs. And so this is a painting in which is the counting of that story. Now, if you look at this painting is pure propaganda. You have the top half of the painting, brightly colored, celebratory, jubilant conquistadors that are motivated by Christianity, ridding the lower panel, positionally lower, below, and also in the foreground, of the dark, hedonistic, sodomistic evilness, right? And so again, the teaching that we want to take from here is not so much the painting, but it is the self-reflexiveness, or thinking about what is the lens that I'm bringing to the painting. So if you ally yourself with the top part of the painting, you will see the goodness within this painting. If you ally yourselves and think of yourself through a lens of being someone who's indigenous and or someone who is two-spirit, you would look at this with horror. Now, what I would like to do is quickly pivot to the story of colonization. And we all know from the Truth and Reconciliation Commission of the residential boarding school experience. So this school, this picture is taken at the first residential school that was ever to be on Turtle Island. This is the Carlisle Indian Industrial School. It opened in 1879 and closed in 1918. And it was founded by this army dude, Captain Richard Henry Pratt, who had not one educational, he was an army dude, took no education at, to get a degree on how to be a teacher. Captain Richard Henry Pratt prided himself on beating people into submission. And he also we got that from the residential boarding school, residential boarding school, we get that famous saying, you know, kill the Indian to save the man, or the forced and failed assimilation policy where they would take Native American children, remove the native so that we just had American children. Now, a couple of fun facts about this school. About 100,000 Native children went through its doors while it was open in this one school. Oh yeah, a little other fun fact is, what does this have to do about Canada? Duncan Scott sent a team of folks down to this one school to learn of this model, and then they came back to Canada and they replicated that entire model here in Canada. So about 100,000 Native children, but from 140 different nations went to this one school, And do you know how many they graduated? 158. Not 158 per year, 158 total. So it's 158 graduates out of 100,000. So that is a graduation rate of it is a graduation rate of 0.158. Like if we want to round up, it's 0.02, which is an abysmal kind of a graduation rate. And so what does this have to do with being Two-Spirit? Well, this has everything, and at the same time, it has nothing to do with being Two-Spirit. So if we like deconstruct or we look at this picture, we will see that on the top part, you have all of the male assigned young boys or men. And on the lower third of the picture, you have all the young female assigned girls and women, young women. And you can also see from the top, from the young men and boys, they all have short hair, they're all wearing pants, and they all have they're all presenting as a male. And on the lower part is that you all have the longer hair, signifying of women and girls, and you also have them all wearing skirts. Gone are all of our Two-Spirit relatives and those other gender roles. So we're not forced to the margin, we're forced completely out of the picture. Gone are our Two-Spirit relatives. And so there's that imposition of that rigid binary gender system that was imposed upon us as Indigenous people. That's why this picture has everything, and at the same it has nothing to do with us as Two-Spirit people. And both realities hold true. Now, I want you to look down on the first row and counting from your left to your right, 1, 2, 3, 4th. There's a young little girl there, and she has her arms crossed. I love her. I love her, and I don't know anything about her, but she is giving me such powerful teachings, and she is also giving me incredible teachings. In that, what she is saying, I think with the arms crossed, is that you can take my picture, but I'm not going to be happy, and I will show my displeasure by crossing my arms to protect myself. And I think it's these little acts of resistance that allows us to be here today as Indigenous people. The power that she is teaching is that so many people think that activism has to be some big, grand, heroic act, you know, like shutting down freeways or chaining yourself to a tree. That is activism. But what she is telling me is you do that which you can. And I think that it is these little acts of resistance that allows both Jesse and I, but also allows all of us to be here today. That this is a failed experiment. Because we're not supposed to be here today. Definitely Jesse and I are not supposed to be here as Two-Spirit people, talking in our own language about our Two-Spirit relatives. So every breath we take is an act of survival. Every exhale is an act of resistance, or what we would say is, survivance. Us merely breathing as Indigenous people is us being activists, to show these people that this was a failed experiment. And for that, I love her. And I think that for you as the teachings is as future leaders is do what you can. And realize the power, the strength, and the fortitude in which that we come from these long lines of resistance of merely people crossing their arms. I share that with you. Oh, what is historical trauma? So we've been talking a little bit about historical trauma with these last two slides. Now, there are many, many definitions of historical trauma. And what I share with you is one from Joseph P. Gong, who is Gros Ventre. That's from like northern Manitoba. Northern Montana, the state of Montana, or southern Alberta-ish. And Joseph P. Gong writes that historical trauma is a combination of immense losses and traumatic events that are perpetrated upon an entire culture. And then I added, it is done through policy and upheld by a criminal injustice or judicial system, right? Meaning that historical trauma is completely made. Like this is not like Superstorm Sandy rolling into the Rockaways and like destroying the Rockaways, like that hurricane that hit New York City, right? This is done through policies and laws, and those policies and laws are upheld by the courts of the conqueror. Now, it's also incredibly important to note that we as Indigenous people, we don't have a hegemony or we don't have a lockdown on what historical trauma is. There are many and many other peoples who have experienced historical traumas. So if we look at the African diaspora of our African American brothers and sisters and our Black and Caribbean Canadian relatives, and the impact of slavery and the slave Atlantic trade, that's their historical trauma. If we look at the internment of our Japanese brothers and sisters during the Second World War, that is their historical trauma. If we also look at the forced labor and the laws that kept our Chinese brothers and sisters, their families broken apart, that is their historical trauma. Or we look at the anti-sodomy laws of our LGBT relatives, where it was against the law for us to actually get together as consenting adults and have sex at one point on this land. That is the LGBT historical trauma. For Native people or Indigenous people, what our historical trauma is our dislocation from our culture as well as our land. And this includes the losses of culture, language, land, people, ways of life, economic systems, ceremony, and family structures by the boarding schools. Now, family structures is huge because it's your family structures that are your core building blocks for societies and nations. And so when your families are being broken and ripped apart, can you or how can you build healthy societies and healthy nations? You can't. My question for you all is, what else was taken from us? So I'm begging the question. I want you to say our Two-Spirit people were taken from us, right? But why don't I put a separate bullet point for Two-Spirit on this slide? Why I don't put Two-Spirit as a separate bullet point? Unlike the broader non-Indigenous LGBT queer movement that wants a separate parade, a separate community center, a separate program, and I'm not being critical, like I'm merely observing and reflecting. I understand why you need that separability so that you can provide strength, right? I totally get it. But for us within the Two-Spirit movement, it is for us to return back to who we were. And so it's how we are in the culture, how, like I introduced myself in my own language, how we have a relationship to our great mother, our great teacher. We are the people. It is a way of life. We had our own role within the economy of our traditional Native communities. My good friend Del first in resurrecting that ceremony. and we are in every family. So I, as a two-spirit person, I see myself completely within that list, a part of that reclamation. And so it's an integrative and a holistic approach rather than a separate and a separability kind of conversation.
Thank you, Ron. So what is being done today to bring back the two-spirit role? So, for example, the Gay American Indian San Francisco was one of the first stories, the first that started in 1975. Bates is the second oldest organization with an amazing powwow, actually. There are two-spirit societies throughout Turtle Island. Two-spirit peoples are included in diversity celebrations and other events, just like today. So today, like we said at the beginning, is so important. We are being given the space back. So the piece is, they're not creating space for us because we've always been here. We're getting this space back that was taken from us. So I think that's such an important piece when we're thinking of empowerment and things. Power was taken from us, so we're taking it back. We're not being given power, we're taking it back. That was something that was stolen from us. Another example, drumming circles in Denver, all over Tulsa, Seattle, Washington, Seattle, and San Francisco, coming back into the circle in reservations and communities. So being invited back, amazing teachings, especially because of this historic binary. The teachings that I've been given from elders, especially in ceremonies where they are kind of ascribing to a certain binary. Elders now, there's an understanding that we have no place to tell you where to sit in the circle. You choose your place where you sit in the circle. So challenging that male or here, female or here piece, which is so important, and then national and international gatherings all over the States and Canada. So again, reinforcing the importance of events like today, taking back space to discuss the two-spirit role and the concept, challenging that binary, challenging when folks are kind of questioning in a negative way, trying to take it back to the roots of where the two-spirit concept came from and who we are as a people. So coming up is just a couple slides of some examples of some amazing work that has been created and released over the last couple of years. So different directory websites, different events and powwow rehearsals and connections. A lot of these actually have been transcribed to online now, so you can Google two-spirit gatherings, and some of them there's a number of events that are coming up in the next couple months and different craft sessions and stuff that I can actually send to Harlan, and maybe we can send out just some links to other two-spirit events coming up.
Oh my God. Let me jump in.
Yeah.
Well, did you see that powwow regalia?
Yeah, I signed up. Yeah.
You signed up.
I did. Shut up. Yeah. So there's a two-spirit. I'll send the link, but there's a two-spirit regalia. I think it's a couple weeks. Different event coming in the next couple. It starts, I think, at the end of February, maybe in the early March. I don't know if everybody's heard about it, but it's I forget the organization putting it on, but there's different teachings every week. To connect back to creating regalia and as well as different other two-spirit items that I've never been able to connect, to create or to learn about. So I think it's a beautiful piece for us to be able to connect further. So me, even as a two-spirit person active in the community, I still haven't been able to connect back to a lot of the two-spirit things that we used to create and utilize within community.
And how much is it?
It's free.
What?
Yeah, it's free. Wow, what a great salesperson here. It's a free event. So you just sign up. I don't remember if on the website there was a cap for how many folks could sign up, but I will send out the link just to get everybody. I think it'll be a beautiful event for us to connect and to connect further. Cool. So more examples are, there's a number of two-spirit books out there now identifying different people's journeys, as well as the reclaiming and the taking of power back of love and beyond our body. So a perfect example there, beyond our body, space and time. So challenging that binary, challenging the societal, historic, heterocentric binary system that we were forced upon.
And so although we don't have a two-spirit library, I do have like 2, maybe 3 copies of Fire Song. Fire Song is this amazing movie, also a book. Adam Garrett Jones wrote it into a book. And I actually have some pre-postage. I'm looking at my bookcase right now because I think that they're out right now. But when I go into community, if someone wants to screen or watch that movie, and doesn't have like the 20 or 30 bucks to pay for it, what I do is I leave the movie and a pre-stamped envelope so that they can mail it back to me, and then I take it back out to community. And so if you're interested in watching that, again, our contact information is at the end. Write it down, send me an email, and I'll be more than happy to send it to you, and you could watch it, maybe screen it in your community, and then you can send it back to me.
And then just the last slide, just some children's books to discuss exactly what we've been talking about today, as well as to learn more about our history as Two-Spirit peoples. And this is just a small number of them that they're growing beautifully, and there's more available today.
So finally is the twospiritjournal.com, which is a multi-platform interactive Two-Spirit news site. So if you go into the twospiritjournal.com, type in resources and hit search, it'll take you to a page in which like a very similar sort of talk that I did to today's talk is recorded there. We did it for CBRC at the summit, Bear Smith and I. And there's also downloadable resources and a whole host of things. I am working on an update for the Two-Spirit resource directory, so it will be updated shortly. So in summary, Two-Spirit, the intersection of those who embody diverse sexuality, gender roles, and gender expressions, and who are indigenous to Turtle Island, is a community organizing tool and not an identity. It's going to mean something different depending on what nation an individual is from and a member of. Two-Spirit refers to a history or a tradition that predates Western notions and concepts such as LGBT, lesbian, gay, bisexual, trans, questioning and queer, and intersex, and the list can go on. It is about reclaiming and restoring our rightful place of honor, respect, and dignity within our own nations. And because of the framing of this work is deep decolonizing work that centers one's ingenuity and calls Two-Spirit people home and is thereby around mending the sacred hoop. Now, I want to share with you some of how do you overcome challenges and disrupt the ordinary. And this is building upon that conversation that we talked about, well, what Jesse started, we talked about the residential boarding school, and these teachings are just shared from our own paths and our own journey. I want to deeply share with you in that when I grew up on my mom's reservation, I was not called nice things. I was teased, I was bullied. And so I left there and I moved to an urban setting. And I lived in New York for 20 years. And then I founded an organization called the Northeast Two-Spirit Society. And what I started doing was advocating and doing policy work. And that led me all the way up to the White House and being appointed twice by President Obama to the US's Presidential Advisory Council on HIV and AIDS as a health advocate. So I am not special. What to take away from that is like, wow, right? But I'm not special. All I did was my weakness that I thought of me being a little sissy boy and also me being an Indian is when I call those home in a supported way is then, and they became places of great strength. And it is our secrets that keep us sick. You know, like when someone used to call me not a nice word like fag or sissy, I would always shy away. Today, I welcome it. So if someone says something like that to me, I'm like, yeah, so? Or someone calls me an Indian. I'm like, yeah, tell me something that I don't know. And I am proud of who I am today. And it is through that fierceness, as well as that brilliance, as well as that power, that it led me to being appointed twice by President Obama, to going to meetings at the White House, to advocating on behalf of my community. So I am not special. And so I share with you these teachings on how to overcome challenges and how you disrupt the ordinary. Number one is know your creation story. So my creation story tells me where I come from, who am I, and what are my sacred teachings. And you're like, wait a minute, I don't know my creation story. I would encourage you to go find out what your creation story is. And in the meantime, start that inquiry of asking, where do you come from, who am I, and what are your sacred teachings? What are your ethics? For me, my seven sacred teachings is wisdom, to cherish all knowledge, love, that I may know peace, respect, and that is to honor all of creation, courage, and this is the one I struggle with, right? Courage is to face a foe with integrity. Sometimes I just want to grind them up into sawdust, right? But I must enact all of the other of love and patience and honesty. I must face them with integrity. Honesty, to be my authentic self and to show up as myself in the world. Rigorous honesty with self and others. Humility, to know myself as a sacred part of all of creation. And then finally, truth, to know that all these things are true and there is no hierarchy. I must walk all 7 truths as one. One, we all have people. Ask yourself, who are your people? And when you find the answer and you get the answer of who your people are, it'll provide you a rooting, a grounding, humility, accountability, respect, transparency, and a lived and embodied truth or medicine. Now, rarely do Native people talk in definitives, right? But I will definitively and absolutely tell you that the Creator doesn't make mistakes. You have all been placed here for a reason. Y'all have a purpose or purposes. Y'all have gift or gifts and medicine or medicines to dispense. Ask yourself the question of, why the heck am I here? What is my purpose? And when you answer that, you will have all of the motivation to guide your actions because you will be walking your truth. Always ask yourself why. Just because something has been done in the past doesn't exempt it from questioning and that it must always be done that way. The answer to this why question also carries a huge responsibility. If no one else is saying what you're thinking, and I know this is going to be hard, is you sit tall, square your shoulders, hold your head high, and speak your truth. Find your voice. Even if it is a question of like, is that really the way it's supposed to be, or is there a better way? If not me, then who? If you're asked to do something or asked about something, always ask yourself, are you the right person to fulfill this request? If there is no one else, if you're not the person, defer and refer. It'll only make you stronger. But if there is no one else around, then if not me, then who? The who falls on you. You have to step up. And this leads me to this last teaching. And this is the hardest teaching that you have ever walked or that you will walk. And that is the belief and trust in yourself, self-love and self-worth. And I'm not saying that folks have not walked this. There are probably folks that have walked this here. It is scary to walk a new path, but it is what as leaders we must do. But we only do that by answering all of these questions. And that you wake up in the morning and you love who you are. But this teachings that I share is my path and the path that I'm sharing with Jesse of the inquiry of answer all of these questions. So this is how, again, pivoting back to this, my own personal story, is I'm not a special person.
I think you are. I disagree, but I understand what you're saying and support that. And I mean, just to speak to, like, I'm very much on this journey with Harlan, and he's been an amazing teacher, mentor to me, and near and dear to my heart. And as a person who wasn't necessarily raised in Métis culture, not that I really knew of, we would do things that I can now relate back to Métis history, Métis culture, and my Métis heritage. But I wasn't raised in that, and I was never really raised as a valid being in the Indigenous society, especially because of my fair skin. And I'm the youngest of 3, but my older 2 siblings do have darker skin than I do. So, but as the fair skin, I always felt stuck in between. I felt insecure to identify as Métis or Indigenous, and I felt that I was doing a disservice to the community by not identifying. And I found that through a lot of Harlan's teachings and the teachings that I've been gifted is to really find my place and my purpose and the privilege that comes with the way that I look and where I am, and that I'm able to stand up and provide the space, not speak on behalf of, but provide the space because of the privilege that I have and the strength that I have been supported to find to advocate for our community. And I always still feel a little insecure sometimes, and that's when I really ask my question: why am I here? What am I doing? If not me, then who? If nobody is here to say something, then I better stand up and say something. I have that responsibility. And that being said, if it's safe. We know now that there's a lot of environments that may not necessarily be safe. So that is number one, is to assess safety. And if you are safe, to stand up and speak. If not, do not hold on to that. I held on to that for so long. Why didn't I say something? And now I'm able to break it down, but it wasn't safe. If I got up and said something, I was alone, I could have been like harassed or a number of things. So safety is number one. But then once we take that, if it is an environment where we are able to, and we feel safe, or maybe not safe, or yes, safe, but feel a little bit nervous, take that nerve and use it. Use that nerve, because that is from a history of colonization and assimilation. That's why we feel a little bit uncomfortable, because society has told us to. So take that, and I use it. I use it to speak up, and I use it to speak about who we are and where we're from. And through that, I'm able to believe and trust in myself and why I'm here. And I believe it is to support and create space, or give the space back.
And thank you so much.
Really fast.
Well, no, it's like, but I think that you probably bring up the thing around safety, right? But remember the teachings of that residential boarding school. If you don't feel safe,
Cross your arms.
cross your arms and call it a victory until the day that you feel safe, in which that you can then uncross your arms and speak your truth and find your voice. Again, we must be safe, but always you can take an action and never beat yourself up, because even us breathing makes us a winner. Literally. All right. Let's see. I keep on jumping around. References.
We have lots, again, like Harlan said, our contact information is in here. So if anybody wants any specific things or has any more questions, please reach out to us. We are always willing to chat. And I will say thank you in Mateshift. I am learning and trying to learn more and more language of my family's language, or of the Métis language. So Pishmashiko, which is thank you, are kind of, the translation isn't as clear into English as we said, but it's kind of like all my greetings, thank you, and acknowledgement, and all my love is kind of what it translates to.
Thank you. And how we say a formal thank you in Cree is Kinonaskomtininawawa. Informally, we would just say hi hi. And the closest expression that we have to goodbye is, because we actually don't have the word goodbye.
I love, which I think is such an important teaching in itself, but that's a whole other conversation.
Is Examaga. And Examaga means until then. Because once our paths have crossed, they're forever intertwined, and they will cross again either in this life or in some other life. It is with the greatest humility and honor that I say, Kinonaskomtininawawa. Hi hi, Examaga.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everyone. What we want to do now is just move into a little bit of a question, comment, and conversation, or what I say is QCC. Anyone has any questions, please put them into the Q&A chat function, if you have any. So what did you all think of that talk? In there. Ooh. Thank you so much, Casey. Okay, are there slides for the, yes, Jessica, we will be sending out a PDF of all of these slides. I'll be sending them to Savannah, and Savannah, are you going to get those out? Perfect. Naomi, Bob, thank you so much. All right, I just want to raise my hands and say, Haichika, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and your gifts. My heart's overwhelmed with the gratefulness and thankful. Oh my God. Brittany, you have honored us with such beautiful words. Thank you. Savannah, do you have any questions for us?
I'm hearing myself. I don't have any questions right now. Do you just want to give a couple more minutes? I know that I just want to give everyone an opportunity to reach out if they have any questions, but that was really beautiful It was so great to see you two present together. I liked your dynamic,
Thank you.
and I learned a lot.
Thank you. Truly, I think like to have somebody like Harlan who came in my life with open arms, especially, and as we continue to, and I think I'm so thankful that it's 2020, like where there's an ability to connect with people online. 2021. Oh my goodness, 2021. That there's an ability for us to connect online and connect with other Two-Spirit leaders, maybe not even if they're in the same city. So Harlan and I actually connected a couple years ago in Montreal, and then have been able to build a relationship since at an Indigenous gathering in Montreal. I also appreciate you for saying that we don't feel safe yet. Yeah, of course, Teresa. It is all about safety and being able to, like Harlan said, if we're comfortable just even crossing your arms. So if you asked, but when I was young, some of us got called out for crossing our arms because crossing our arms meant being defensive. How should we address that?
I guess the only way that I would, the whole, like you got called out for crossing your arms.
It was disrespectful.
Because it was being disrespectful, right? I'm sure for that young woman in that picture is that she could be viewed as being disrespectful. And again, there's also these cultural overlays. Like I remember being called out in a class at the University of Alberta for wearing my baseball cap in class one day. And the professor was like, and he asked me to take my baseball cap off. My hair was all askew. And I said, why should I take my cap? Why am I being asked to take off my baseball cap? And the professor, who was non-Indigenous, European descent, straight, cis, said, in my world where I come from, when a gentleman enters in the house or a building, they take their cap off. And my retort back to that individual was like, in that same world, I, as a gay native or a Two-Spirit person, would not be allowed in that same house, in that building. And so again, we must question, where is that coming from? Is the rudeness just because it's their systems of rudeness? And so it is always through that lens or that inquiry. And what ended up happening is I ended up taking off my baseball cap halfway through the 3-hour seminar. And I ended up dropping out of that university, and I moved to New York, and I went to a different school. It was only because what I started doing is like just critically looking at what I was learning, and there wasn't anything that was affirming of my ingenuity of who I was. And so I went to a different school, and I got the teachings and the learnings that was affirming of who I was. And again, I just question. The one thing is just question, and if you're safe, raise voice to those questions.
I totally agree, Judy. I think everyone should see the presentation. So Savannah did ask, how do you relate the term to the term Indigenous brilliance? So thank you. So I think, Two-Spirit concept in itself is brilliant. Like the ability, because we've been shoved into these boxes for so long, and then now to push these boxes, to push the binary that has been forced upon us, to push basically the societal view of everything. So a good example of that is, as I said, I'm in my master's. So now writing from a lens that is not ascribing to the binary, researchers don't like that. Academia does not like that at all. And I get constant feedback and constant pushback of like, but what does this mean? I'm writing about somebody who's Two-Spirit and gay. And they're like, well, why are you writing them both out? And I was like, because for this person, they identify it just like me. I'm Two-Spirit and I'm gay. One doesn't cancel out the other. So it's the importance of reporting out who we are and how we feel, and also pushing that binary boundary back, especially in the world of research. And that's a piece that as leaders and as folks who may go into research, it's so important that we challenge that, because especially in quantitative and in qualitative work, the history is very square, like very, very square. And it will try and put you into those boxes. So it's so important to come in there with support. So Harlan is a perfect support when I get pushback, and I'm not able to find the words exactly of how to explain it, because unfortunately the words aren't there. They've been erased. So now we're trying to bring them back to push back the Western view of academia.
Shine on, and there's nothing more that I can add. I think Jessica raised her hand. Can you unmute Jessica and ask? All right.
Yeah, I don't see how I can call on her, but if you do have a question, you can enter it into the chat function or into the Q&A chat function as well. And we still do have a couple of minutes, so if anyone has any questions or concerns or wants Harlan and Jesse's contact, we can definitely send it to you after the conference as well. And this is all being recorded, so we're hoping to gift it to as many people that would like to see it, as well as we are sending it to small rural communities that don't have the best internet access. So this will be our gift as well. Harlan and Jesse, do you have any questions or concerns?
Yeah, the thing is that I hope that from the teachings that we say is, one, that we are all brilliant. And that this is not a message for just Two-Spirit people. This is a message for all Indigenous people. And that what we must do is that last teaching or that last truth of like to know yourself, to love and honor and respect who you are. Begin the inquiry there, and everything will come from that out of it. That brilliance, but the brilliance must start internal. And once you answer those questions and you get to that place of self-love and realize that that is the hardest journey you will ever walk.
And it's continuous every day.
Always continuous. That great things will happen to you. Like someone who's 53, I wish that someone would have told me this when I was younger, and where I was just fumbling around in the dark, all by myself as a Two-Spirit person. And again, I'm not special. And if I can do it, anyone else can do it within the world, literally. But again, start that inquiry.
I totally agree. And Jessica just made a comment about sexuality within high school, within university, and within teaching. And I tell you, even within nursing school, so a healthcare professional, 4-year degree, the concept of sexuality, and we're not just talking about sex, we're talking about everything within that realm is just glossed over. And for me, a piece that I would love to look into is how that is just the legacy of colonization and assimilation and shame. So as well as religious views of separating sex from our core foundation, but not just penetrative sex, we're talking about sexuality, everything. It was stripped away from us and used to punish us, or used to shame us into doing what folks wanted. So this piece was completely taken out of our core foundation, and this is the work that Harlan and I are doing, is bringing it back into who we are, because it is who we are. It is a piece of us. Being Two-Spirit, being gay for me, being male identified as me. These are all pieces of me that were split up. But they're not all split up. They're all one, and that was now putting this back together. And a huge thing is education and challenging the shame that we force upon kids to fit into a binary, to not talk about certain things, to all this shame of it within the realm of sexuality and sex and sexual health. And it's such a hard piece, which is why this work can be so difficult, is because so many folks relate it to shame and to different pieces. So we need to break down all those barriers, break down not just the discrimination within the queer realm, the racism, and also the discrimination within sex in itself. So it's like a multi-level piece that is the reason why it's difficult, and the conversations are difficult.
With that, kinunaskum tininawawa, hi examaga.
Thank you, everyone.
Oh, you're on mute, Savannah.
Well, thank you. With that, I think we, from Indigenous Youth Wellness, from our team, we're so grateful that we were able to collaborate with you for the first keynote of Cloud Connections Conference, and we're just so grateful that you were able to join us both. Again, if anyone has any questions, let us know, and we can definitely put you into contact if you would like. But Harlan and Jesse, thank you. And now we say goodbye.